Have you ever heard of double jeopardy? It's the concept that you can't be punished for the same crime twice, and so given that I already served a ban for hate speech, that should explain what I'm building today. But this is some huge gaming news, by the way, because Microsoft are considering spinning out Xbox into its own business and potentially even selling it. This would change the entire face of the games industry, but also some of its biggest franchises, which includes Mojang. So what's happening? How will it change Minecraft? And indeed, will that actually result in Minecraft getting more investment? And what is the latest on the multiplayer ban situation? Well, let's give updates for all of that today, because hello, I'm AbYex Toycat, and by the way, I got my start with the Xbox 360 version of the game, which is why I was so almost dismayed when I saw this viral post from Valuetainment on Instagram and Twitter, which said that Microsoft is considering selling Xbox. This is something that went very crazy. It's got 4 million views, but right above that view count, you can see that it actually has a community note, which clarifies that according to this Reuters business article, actually what they're considering doing is spinning off the unit, but also they're considering restructuring it to make it a wholly owned subsidiary. That sounds like exactly where they are right now, but the critical difference here is that instead of using Xbox as a way to push Microsoft products and services, so the stupid Edge browser that's included, or for example, the big bet on subscriptions and cloud gaming, instead of having to have the console push those Microsoft things, instead they could have it be profitable on its own right. This would mean that they can actually make the big investments they need to into big titles, and so Asher Sharma, who is the new CEO of Xbox, actually says that their plan with this is to make big investment in their most successful franchises, and although they specifically name drop the Halo, Fallout, and Elder Scrolls franchises, the one that interests me the most is Mojang. They do specifically say they're going to be making a bigger investment in Minecraft, and the reason why, for anyone unfamiliar, is that in 2014, Microsoft bought Mojang, but they actually put it into its Xbox Games division, which is a part of Xbox. Here is confirmation from the Minecraft wiki if you need it from someone besides me, but this is a huge deal because one of the biggest Xbox game studios, and by far one of the most profitable, is of course Minecraft. They basically have a license to print money, and even if they really do have 1,000 employees, which sounds shocking when you know that like a dozen of those work on the base game, but if they have 1,000 employees, they're still likely making a ludicrous profit margin, which is important because this whole article, this whole idea of spinning off Xbox basically comes down to one factor, and we can find out why if we go into the thing that Reuters Business is actually referencing here. The headline here is actually that Microsoft has considered spinning off Xbox according to the information, but what is the information? Well, it's a very paywalled industry insider site it seems, but if I get you past that for now, you can see that there's some very intriguing things referenced here. The first one is the fact that even though that tweet and that Reuters article sound like they are immediately going to be selling the company, actually it says that Microsoft doesn't have any imminent restructuring plans, but the thing they are going to do imminently is to have significant layoffs. Wow, that is a very new idea for the games industry, but they're going to be using these cost cuts to boost spending on new Xbox games from its most popular franchises to excite die-hard fans, which is at least better than the usual explanation of cost cutting, which is more money, more shareholder price, etc. Because right now, Xbox is in a bit of a bind. Their profit margins are just 3%, which is, you know, that's going to be a lot of billions of dollars, don't get me wrong, but after spending $75 billion on Activision Blizzard, it's the last thing a company wants to see, and this isn't new news. Obviously, line must go up, and company gets sad when line instead goes down. And so what is the solution right here? Well, it seems as though one of the big things they're considering is to make massive investments into Xbox, and the way that they want to potentially structure that is the same way that they have LinkedIn or GitHub work. So, fun fact by the way, before I go any further, you can't actually type LinkedIn on a Minecraft sign. If you type it in like this as all one word, something weird happens, which it gets censored, which is silly. And anyway, one of the things that's important is that LinkedIn and GitHub both function as their own little silos within the broader Microsoft business. That is to say that they can do basically anything they want, and although there are small links between GitHub and Microsoft, and LinkedIn and Microsoft, did you know if you're watching this on a Windows PC, type Shift, Control, Windows key, Alt, and L, and it will open up LinkedIn in your browser. That's hard-coded into the operating system because, you know, you got to have some way to cross-promote, but for the most part, these divisions operate separately, whereas Xbox must operate within the broader Microsoft corporation to reach broader Microsoft goals, but if Microsoft doesn't really care about releasing new games, then you get the current situation where, again, no new games since 2011 or 2014 for the Elder Scrolls and Fallout franchises, and so what can they do? Well, they can invest a bunch of new money and just say, look, all you should care about Xbox is making yourself profitable, and Xbox believes that instead of following the subscription way forward, or instead of following all of the other ways that Microsoft might like them to follow, instead they can just make some damn good games and invest a lot of money into into their studios, and they do specifically call out Mojang. They do this both directly by saying that Minecraft is a game that needs bigger investment because it is one of the most popular online games of all time, but it has recently fallen behind its competitor Roblox in daily average users, according to external estimates. This is something I only learned for the first time here, so learn something new every day, but also, crucially, they say that they want to have more investment because right now they have these industry-defining franchises which are not adequately funded. And I know that on the internet it's very unpopular to say that businesses should ever cut their costs if it ever involves human beings, but let's use Mojang as a prime example of a studio that has somewhere in the hundreds of employees, and how many of those employees are actually working on making the game better. We could maybe generously say that it's close to 100, but at every big corporation, especially when you have initiatives that come from the top down to make something that makes sense in another company but not really in yours, you get people whose whole jobs is to just send emails or to make pretty graphs or PowerPoints or to, in other words, justify their job and justify how good things are going so that they can use it to justify their job to their manager. There's all sorts of silly things that happen in corporate hierarchies, and hopefully what Xbox can work out is how to actually use the amount of money it's spending to improve things. I mean, to put things in just pure financial terms here, what they said is that when Microsoft acquired Activision Blizzard, the studio had 40% operating margins, but now it's sunken down to just 3%, which clearly shows that something is being horribly mismanaged. And again, the basic gamer take here is like, yes, if you buy game studios, but then you don't make good games, you're probably not going to make good money. If you have Mojang as an easy example, with somewhere in the range of hundreds of employees to thousands, but you can generously describe the number who actually make Minecraft better as being in the dozens, maybe 100 we could say, but yet we still, we have a studio with hundreds of employees, but over the weekend, no one can overhaul false bans that stop you from using your services. Or indeed, there are all sorts of other key situations where Minecraft could make massive expansion, but seemingly is unable to in the current structure, and so Microsoft is likely going to spin out Xbox, and if it doesn't improve, then it might just sell it. Because although Xbox is a huge overall part of the gaming world, it only represents 7% of Microsoft's overall revenue, and so it could just be in the best of both companies to sell it, but hopefully before they get to that point, they can just make some good games, sell some good games, and maybe make some money too. I mean, that would be the ideal, right? I do think there's a really interesting discussion about who we would or wouldn't like Minecraft to be sold to, but I do have to mention before we go any further that we actually have an update regarding the ban situation that happened this weekend. So the simplest update is that when someone asked Jeb on the Skeets platform, he actually responded by saying that it is being investigated, which wasn't very useful, but let me tell you, I have now been unbanned. I am able to play Minecraft on my survival world. Very, very exciting. But what actually happened there and how did I get unbanned? Well, I submitted an appeal basically immediately, and I assumed it was the appeal that got me unbanned, but after looking into it, they actually sent me an email about 36 hours later asking for a ridiculous list of information, like the first 3 cities I logged into my Xbox account from. It's like, I started my Xbox account in 2006, man. But then second of all, interestingly, they actually unbanned me before sending the follow-up to this email, so I have no idea what happened, but someone at Microsoft actually got this fixed on Monday, which is very good. But what are they doing to make sure it doesn't happen in the future? Well, we have a statement from Mojang, which I can show you in my tweet form, but since rather than using myself as a source here, I'll show you this, which is where I got it from, although I can't show you the usernames or anything involved. Basically, Mojang put out a statement where they said, quote, "We are actively looking into what happened. Our support team worked quickly over the weekend to help restore access to those who were impacted, and they're keeping a close eye on the situation." And I hate to accuse someone at Mojang of saying PR speak over facts, but they did not work quickly over the weekend. They worked on Monday. Just want to throw that one out there. But second of all, this doesn't actually say anything. They say they're looking into it and they're keeping a close eye because presumably they're doing an investigation into what in their system works this way, but it shouldn't really need an investigation, right? There is some automation in the system that says if you get enough reports and those reports seem good enough, then just ban immediately, and that's not how any system should work. And I think the simplest way you can describe it, Kayubi Hitachi says, this is an example of why massive reliance on AI will backfire, but the real Meetable has a really fun reference to IBM here, which is that a computer can never be held accountable, therefore a computer must never make a management decision. And it's true, if you're going to suspend people's access to things they paid for, you should have a human who can at least, take the fall for it or ideally defend their decision, as opposed to a machine that goes, that's weird, it made a little mistake, but I guess it's fine because we fixed it now. Anyway, that is my little bit of a rant here. Also, we have a 26.31 changelog that existed at the exact same time. Notably, this one just pretends that the update came out on Monday. They don't acknowledge that it rolled out on Friday, and so I think that's very interesting. I also think it's interesting that we have an update on the classic texture pack. This was removed, interestingly, on June the 5th, and BezzyB, who is someone who is a big part of the kind of classic movement in Minecraft, says, just want to mention here, but it's an important question. It seems as though this pack was delisted due to how broken it is. I was wondering if you know if it will be relisted, and Jeb just says it was delisted because it wasn't maintained. And so that is a very interesting thing. If you want the classic texture pack, you can't download it anymore. If you have the classic texture pack, they're not going to maintain it or do anything with it, and so no longer can you have the classic textures on Bedrock. Although, of course, programmer art still exists on Java, and you can even load it up while you're in the middle of the game, which is a fun Java exclusive. There are lots of odd Java exclusives like that one, but that is kind of where I want to go with my next point here, because to finish this video up, which studios would be a good controller of Mojang via Xbox, and which ones would be bad? I've kind of thought about this as an easy list. I think that the ideal world, because I do assume, maybe too optimistically, I do assume that actually just investing money, making better games, more updates, etc. I think that that is a good way to make money as a game studio. Call me crazy, call me callous even for saying that, more of game studios' resources should be spent on making games than whatever it is they're doing right now. But what I will say is that as far as studios that could buy Xbox, I think there are definitely some really, really bad answers. The good ones are clearly like Nintendo. Nintendo would be the ideal owners of a Minecraft franchise. I think it fits in quite well with the rest of what they do, honestly, and the only downside you probably experience if you were not a Switch player is they probably try to have some more features, just like how they're really heavily pushing the vibrant visuals. They try to have some more features and some more optimization for Nintendo, but outside of like promoting new consoles, I bet they would still choose to keep it on all the other platforms, because who's turning down all of those sales and marketplace subscriptions, etc. I think that Sony therefore would be another good choice, because again, in the console space, it seems as though things are just getting a little too tight between Xbox and Sony, and it seems as though both platforms can't exist, and clearly it's the PlayStation that's winning out for the next generation, or at least in this generation. Whether that continues or not is something that we'll have to see, because the next generation of consoles does seem as though it's on hold until prices can come down. Funnily enough, the exact same reason that you can be banned from your Minecraft world is the same reason that you won't get a new console. Isn't that fun? But yeah, I do think that Sony buying the Xbox games division probably would be the best bet for the survival of both companies, maybe I could say, at least how things look right now. That seems unthinkable, but it was probably unthinkable that, like, Sega games would be on Nintendo consoles, so maybe the same thing happens with Xbox and Sony. But anyway, the very worst case scenarios, just to remind yourself, if you think like, wow, Microsoft, Micro Dollar Soft, am I right? Micro Dollar Soft, am I right? That's that. We're basically there. But the interesting thing here is the fact that, like, actually, I think that if Ubisoft or EA had it, you'd be logging into your Ubisoft account, there'd be your DLCs would be paid, there'd be microtransactions behind all sorts of things that you think of as thinkable right now, because that is how those studios seek to exist. They want to milk their franchise for everything it's worth. Right now, they're willing to sacrifice the game in 3 years' time for a good few quarters now, and I'm glad that we have a game studio that is willing to look into the future, because the future is where things be exciting, I do say. By the way, this was a cool battleship, eh? Anyway, with that said, thank you for watching. I hope you all enjoyed, because I'll see you in the next one. Good boy.